Yeah, we're live. It is 6:41. I'm even here before 7. Tonight we're talking about a couple things. The thumbnail that I have up is a photo of a test I did long ago, a BBK aluminum aftermarket intake manifold for the LS. This particular one was actually tested on LS1, the original, the OG, the original gangster LS1. And we know that it makes power. I know that it makes power because I tested it. so I know exactly what it does. In fact, I can tell you, and we'll go ahead and look here. So we have our stock one. There's our BBK. Stock intake manifold 462. BBK 488, 489. So 62 and 89. 27 horsepower. So the BBK was worth 27 horsepower. So for you guys just tuning in, or you guys are will tune in later. The BBK intake manifold on the thumbnail was worth 27 horsepower. But that's not really what we're going to talk about tonight, because you should be asking yourself, and you should be asking yourself every time that somebody does a test like this, or that you see some kind of dyno results and somebody says, hey, yeah, this cam is worth this much. This intake is worth this much. This whatever, some of these cylinder heads are worth this much. Compared to what? That's the question. And this is very important for an LS, because if we look at an intake manifold, we might be able to get 60, 70 horsepower from an intake manifold swap. How would we do that? Well, there are a lot of ways. This BBK one obviously isn't going to do that. But the intake manifold that we're comparing it to is very important. So if we have an aftermarket intake manifold, like a FAST or this BBK, the YN, whatever it is, we have an aftermarket intake manifold. And then which factory intake manifold are we going to compare it to? This is very important. So if this is an LS3 application and we're comparing a FAST LS3 to a stock LS3, don't be surprised if you have this many horsepower gain, if you have none, because that's normally what will happen. If you have a FAST manifold, a cathedral port, and an LS4 intake manifold, you could have 40, 50 horsepower or more, depending on, and this will be the other thing. So you have to ask yourself, what are we comparing it to? And then what are we comparing it on? Is this a stock 4.8? We're not going to have that much power gain. Is this a 6-liter or a 408 stroker that has really good heads on it already and a big camshaft? We might have some serious power gains on that sort of combination. So which one of those is true? Which one of those is accurate? Does the intake manifold only make 12 horsepower like on a stock 4.8, or does it make 60 horsepower on a stroker? The answer is it does both of those. But which one would people promote if you were selling manifolds, and let's say that you had one that you were selling on eBay and you wanted to say, hey, I want to sell this manifold, and you could say, hey, this manifold is worth 60 horsepower gain in a test that Richard did. Or would you say this intake manifold is worth 12 horsepower? So forget about I know that a lot of guys think that the manufacturers are purposely deceiving them and trying to sell stuff. But let's put the shoe on the other foot. Let's say that you had it and it was used and you were selling it and you wanted to sell it, and you wanted to sell it for a lot of money. You had a FAST manifold. You knew it was worth a lot of money. Would you say that it's worth 12 horsepower on your stock 4.8? Or would you say that it's worth 55 or 60 horsepower on the 408 that was actually tested on? Because look, both of those are true. So which one of those would you use to sell the manifold? Only you guys can answer that. But you have to also ask yourself which one of those is true. And the answer is they're both true. And it might even be more than that on another application. So you have to, and we see the same thing with camshafts. And with the camshafts, the situation is the same. So if we say, hey, look, this cam picked up 50, 60, 70 horsepower. Okay, what did it pick up 70 horsepower compared to? Did it pick up 70 horsepower compared to a stock LS9 camshaft, a stock LS1, an LS6, or was it against the low man on the totem pole, the LM7 camshaft? Because all of those other factory cams are going to be a big jump up in power compared to the LM7. You have the LM7, and then you have all the other things that are better than that. But if you have an LS1, LS2, LS3, LS6, LS7, LS9, those cams are all going to be better. Then this other aftermarket cam that you have is worth, so much more power. Is it worth a lot more power than the most powerful other factory cams? Or is it just worth a lot of power compared to the LM7 camshaft, the 4853 camshaft, the truck cam, the low man on the totem pole? You got to ask yourself that. Even for my stuff, you should, that's why I try to put all that information together. Here is our test motor. Here's what it is. Here's what we ran to start our thing out. And then here is what the change that we made. Hopefully it's just one thing. And then here's what happened. Same thing with all these things, particularly cylinder heads. Hey, cylinder heads are worth 100 horsepower. Not unusual to get 100 horsepower gain from a cylinder head. But all the other things have to be there for the motor to want the head flow. On a stock 4.8, supported heads might not do anything at all. But on a good motor that needs head flow, particularly on a cathedral port application that is already somewhat limited on a factory LS3, you're not going to get a ton of power from ported heads because they're just it's already does so well to begin with. And that's the thing that happens. We got to look at that. So that's very important. So when you're looking at data on the interwebs, ask yourself that. You should ask yourself, well, what picture is this person trying to paint? Are they trying to show big numbers because it helps them with views? Or are they trying to paint big numbers because it helps them sell products? Are they trying to do something to make themselves stand out? Find out what their motivation is, and then figure out what are you actually comparing here, because that's very, very important. The other thing I want to talk about is the photo that I have up is a BBK aluminum intake manifold. So we got to talk about heat soak a little bit. The BBK manifold, definitely worth power. Like I said, 20, 30 horsepower compared to and this is compared to the early LS1 manifold. Basically number 2 on the worst manifold ever produced for the LS application. Only bettered or worsened in our case by the LS4 intake manifold, which is terrible. The early LS1, not good. Everything that came after that, much better. All the truck manifolds, the LS6s, the LS2s, LS3 for rec port stuff, but all the cathedral stuff is better except for that LS4 intake manifold. So again, you have to ask yourself, is it what are you comparing it to? But on the BBK, in the comparison that I did, because this was an early LS1, we compared it to the LS1 manifold that we had. In fact, I ran a bunch of different intake manifolds on this. We ran a Wyandotte, we ran an LS6 because we had one of those. We ran the early fast. We ran a bunch of stuff. And then eventually later on, when they became available, because a lot of this testing was done before these manifolds were even produced, but we would run the ProFlow and the high RAM and those kinds of things. But the question is, on these aluminum manifolds, do we get heat soak? And does heat soak reduce power? In fact, that's got to be our poll, right? Okay, does heat soak reduce power on an aluminum intake manifold after it gets hot? That will be our poll. What do you guys think? And actually, this is not just about this BBK. This is the one that I took the picture of and I'm using for the thumbnail. Honda has aluminum manifolds, a lot. Small block Chevys that had iron and aluminum ones, small block Fords, big block Chevys, all of those. Very, very common. So the question is that, if you just were to start the motor up and everything's cold, you got cold air going in the manifold and making it feel cold. Actually, at wide open throttle, there should be a lot of cold air going through there because you shouldn't be drawing heated engine air through that. That's a big mistake for power. If you're getting cold air and you're drawing lots of cold air, my thoughts are that you're cooling the manifold. But you guys let me know. You guys tell me and let me know. My question to you guys, and let me know in the comments, if heat soak is reducing power in an aluminum intake manifold, for instance, how is it doing it? Is it changing the temperature of the air at wide open throttle? Do we see hotter air going into the motor? Does it actually have time for the hot to come off of the aluminum manifold and go into the moving air? Does that happen? Is that really a thing? Let me know in the comments. Let me know what you guys think. Let's see. Burns is back. Specialty. What's going on, guys? I support this content. I love data. Yep. So blue jets in front of it. Bob, what's worth 100 horsepower on a 540? Couldn't this stuff be described in the same way that the PC components are bottlenecks? They're not really, though, because it's a bottleneck indicates an airflow restriction. Like a throttle body could be considered that. Not an intake manifold, though, because an intake manifold doesn't gain power like these intake manifolds don't gain power from additional flow. In fact, in a lot of cases, we put on intake manifolds, one of them doesn't flow as much air if you were to airflow test it as the other one, and yet it still makes more power. And the reason it does that is because there are other things going on with intake manifolds that are irrespective of airflow. The custom one I built netted me 70 horsepower over the stock manifold on a full race SRT4. The stock was pushing 710 horsepower at 22 psi. And the custom 873 with bell mouth and the runners, etc. That's a lot. After the new turbo was thrown on. Does it lose power compared to plastic cast iron? That's the question. That's what our poll is talking about. Thought I remember an Engine Masters episode where the conclusion was the airflow is too fast to be heated. Richard, you should do a video on stack tolerance. What am I measuring the tolerances on? Certainly not bearing clearance, right? Pulling LS6 intake off to put a cleaned up fast LSXR and a Nick Williams 102 millimeter throttle body. Engine made 462 wheel horsepower with an LS6, hoping for 30. What size motor is that? 462. Is that a 6-liter? A fast, every time I've tested it, has been a good bit better than an LS6. I was running a Z50 engine once and looked down and there was frost covering the intake manifold. Yeah, if you have the fuel entry, on top of the intake manifold, that's not unusual. I'm not sure what to answer on this poll. I personally don't think that there's enough time for the temperature to go from the heated intake manifold to the air. But, that's me. Do you think heat soak is a thing on a running engine? I think if anything, heat soak would be more of a factor under cruise while the airspeed is low and there's not very much of it. Yours is a 348. Okay, so a 5.7. And actually, when you think about it, if heat soak is changing the temperature, you're going to get better mileage if it heats it up. I bought some stuff today from Summit. My Summit people got some tires for the Omni, some new tires. 205 50 15s. Bearings, pistons, and the whole thing. Bearings tend to be pretty spot on. But if everything from rod ends to cranks are off by 2000, then it adds up. Oh, I see what you're talking about. So if we have more than one thing off, yeah. Yeah, you don't want the bearing clearance. You don't want the bearings themselves to be incorrect and the crank tolerance to be incorrect. And by incorrect, I just mean off in one direction or another. Old school low profiles. Mine are 205s. I've got some Nittos because they're Nitto. Some Nittos. So how's our poll doing? Does heat soak reduce power on aluminum intake manifold after it gets hot? 54% are saying yes. Who out there has iron LS6 heads? I mean, LS6 heads. I would take those too. Who out there has iron LS heads? So from 99 or 2000. That's 4,000s right there. Yeah, four is a lot. 4,000s is not a lot to be off on ring gap. 4,000s is a lot to be off on bearing clearance. Let's see. You're gonna spray your L83. We did that. It works. It works good. Live chat. Although I have to admit, I think when we were doing the L83, I think we knocked an electrode off of one of them. Putting 195 45 15s on the Swift. Very cool. Man, I had tiny little tires on the Sprint because we were doing mileage. So I think that they were 145s, if I remember right. 15s, those are meaty. Meaty, beefy, big, and bouncy. So the Omni will have new wheels and tires on it when I go pick it up, which will be in November. I'm gonna go back and see the guys, see the boys from the car farm, Brian and Ben, awesome folk. It's funny how all that you think about. Now I've got friends, but you think about how all that worked out. I just fly out to some weird spot in the middle of Ohio. Hey, dude, what's up? I don't know, dude, what's up? I don't know. Let's do some stuff. All right, that's cool. So I spent my day. Kid threw his motor together and couldn't even spin it by hand, so I dropped it off. So sad they had to do a complete tear down and a fresh rebuild. Oh, I still think something is else. There's nothing worse than, and that's why I like to spin everything when I do each thing when I'm putting the motor together, so I can figure out what dumb thing I did. Oh, I put a cap on backwards. Yeah, that's not a good idea. Look, it doesn't want to spin. It spins when I set the crank in there, and then doesn't spin when I put the caps on there. So something's going. It's got to be the cap then, right? Is there any gain changing from E85 to methanol when turboed? Yes, you'll make more power with methanol. I'm guessing. I haven't done that, but all the signs and all the racing and stuff points to yes. I do want to. Methanol is one of the things I want to run next. I want to run gas, E85, and methanol. Todd, rare question. Mastercraft boat running twin 205 LQ9 Crusaders, so 6 liters. Okay. Rev limit to 5,500. Intake cam, Rex engines are stock Cadillacs. So you have 2 of those in the boat. Is it a big boat? How big is this thing? All right, now are they rev limited to 5,500 just like from the factory because of the ECU or something? If you're a GT wheels look good on Omnis. No, this has to have GLHS wheels on it. Okay, 28 foot. Yeah, that's good size. That thing probably goes pretty good with 2 6 liters on it. But yeah, you can make lots of power. You can put cams and intakes and if it's an LQ9, does it 2005? Does it have truck intake manifolds on it still? And does it have 317 or 243 heads on it? 145, 80, 12, I think is stock on a non-turbo. Props will probably cavitate over 5,500. Okay. Stock trucks. Okay. Are you not running? Are you running all the way to the peak RPM in this thing? If you are, then you're there, unless you put more prop in it. But you could certainly make a lot more power with those. Any sort of camshaft in that, and since you're going to be doubling your power gain if you put 2 camshafts in it, you're going to, you'll pick up a pretty good bit of power. But if you only put 1 prop in, then the boat will just drive around in circles. Are you pulling skiers with that or anything, where you have to, go from the dig? Got to get it out of the hole. Got to get her up on plane. I'd like to get rid of my 502 mags in the 35-foot cigarette. Currently 450 horse. Swap some good LS setups with good low end grunt. 502s probably have pretty good low speed power though. It is a ski boat. Okay. Well, you probably don't have any problem getting up on plane in that boat with those motors. That thing probably comes up pretty good. Running the highest pitch prop, fighting efficiency. .502s are good, and if they're 502s, you can make them 540s. November 11th, Radwood, San Pedro. What is that? Is that like the Chris Craft deal their regatta deal that they do up at Tahoe? Rock Buggy. Scroll back a few comments. I think I proved the heat soak question. You think you proved it? Let's see. I proved this with the LS6 intake versus the Pro Comp. Had to adjust the VE table an average of 12%. That doesn't prove anything. That proves that those 2 intake manifolds are different. And they are. The LS6 is definitely different than the Pro Comp intake manifold. Oh, 1985-95 car show. I know we have car shows here at the local Foster Freeze, which I can't wait to take my little Omni down there. I think the air moves too fast to the intake manifold to make a significant difference. I just would like to see it. I mean, I know that, like somebody said, when we have carburetors, the intake manifold is really cold. A lot of marine engine builders don't like the 540 rod angle for longevity. Okay. I think heat soak is real in a car, especially at idle after a few pulls. That's why drag racers ice their intake manifolds. Heat soak and drag racing was my trick to beat my friend Supra. As he would 2-step at the light, I would fake him out. So we started running the 2-step about 15 seconds earlier. So you weren't letting him spool up, or were you letting him spool up too much? Thermal spacers were fashionable on the MR2 community. They were a very big thing. They sold the heck out of those things for 5-liter Mustangs back in the day. Heat soak on stock tune can pull timing due to higher inlet air temperatures. But do you think that happens? Does the inlet air temperature change at wide open throttle? He spooled up too much waiting for you to stage. Saw Plymouth Arrow going down the highway over this weekend. I've not seen one of those in years. I know that it's been a long time since I saw one of those. 502s or airflow research 315 heads and custom cams away from making 700. 700. 502s can make a lot of power. Run E85, 90 or M1 plus the air to water intercooler with the inner chiller. You also run an inner chiller? Inlet air temp sensor wouldn't be anywhere near the intake manifold itself. They are on a lot of applications. The 5-liter Mustang, it was right in the intake manifold. Later on, they moved it to the, I think they moved it to the mass air meter. Richard, you're gonna watch the show after cooking dinner. I'm gonna use a cat decide to sleep in my spot. I know, but whenever Lisa gets up from bed, the dogs jump up and take her spot. They and me too. If I get up, they're like, we're like, oh, this is a good spot right here. GM 5-wire maps have the inlet air temperature inside. Joey, I don't understand your question. Heat soaking carbs will warm the fuel in the bowl, so the carb applications does have a greater effect. Insulating the fuel rails is worth up to 15 horsepower. Insulating the fuel rails on a fuel injected motor? I haven't seen that. In fact, we did more than that. We ran them through a cooler and ice water and brought the temperature down by quite a bit and didn't show any power. 502 Magnum problem is the Magnum cross ram manifold. There's a Speed Marine cuts down the runners and radiuses the runners. Next build, I'll drill an aluminum intake and log it on one of the runners and reference the inlet air temperature to see the temperature difference. We've done that a lot on the engine dyno, and we don't see it at wide open throttle. I want to talk to Brule about the test that they did, because they did some fuel temperature tests, and they did see some power changes from like icing the intake manifold, because that's one of the things that they did. And I wanted to ask him about that to see if they had any other correlating data, like if there was a change in airflow or something. Because it might be that if we saw a corresponding change in airflow, then I would understand it. I bought the universal kit to hook up to the AC, but no real difference in inlet air temperature from the ice tank. Less plumbing, but now I have an AC, so parasitic loss, those 6s at the end. Yeah, and don't you have an air to water intercooler with ice water in it? Aren't you good already? And M1, I mean, aren't you the coolest guy in the world already? What do you think is better for a Pro Charger, blow through carb, Sniper EFI, or Sniper 2 EFI? I don't know what the difference between Sniper EFI and Sniper 2 EFI is. I can tell you that if you get one of those 4-hole throttle bodies and you can get it to work and have it be consistent, that you probably could tune that better than you can the carburetor, but you're still at the mercy of the intake manifold. So the intake manifold is going to determine what your fuel distribution is like, unless you did port injection. But then you get rid of some of the charge cooling. But hopefully your Pro Charger also has an intercooler on it. 540 combos have come a long way. 6.385 rod is the most popular. And just about all pistons nowadays have the correct skirts to handle the stroke and rod length. You guys with the big bows are my heroes. I got an old Yamaha GP 1200R, fast as hell, but Got to be an athlete to stay at speed in big water. I'd say in theory it would heat soak, but it would be too minuscule to matter. Wine and Lingenfelter made that LS1 intake. I have ones that have been sitting. Wondering if you tested any. Yeah, I've tested it many, many times. In fact, that intake manifold is in the. If you look at the video where I tested the like 20 different cathedral port intake manifolds, that's one of the ones that I tested. Todd needs help with his prop situation. With more horsepower solve, a top end, TBSS and cams are easy, but props are $600 each. Props in LH, RH 13.7 by 19.5. I have no frame of reference for prop pitches. The data doesn't show underhood temps like a real work. Yeah, I agree. It doesn't. The underhood temps can be really high with the hood closed, and that's why cold air intake going into the motor is so important. But I think that the temperature change that you would get to the fuel, would that be as much as the pressure that you're putting in it from pressurizing the fuel? I think when Engine Masters did their test, they also tried heating the fuel. There's a nitrous plate in front of the Procharger for cooling, and it'll rock. In front of the Procharger? So you have nitrous going into the supercharger? Because that would help make more power. I pulled the ice tank to try the inner chiller and going back to the ice tank. Okay. And Burns, you also have the weight of the ice tank and stuff too. It's all something. Add salt to your water to air intercooler. Josh, unrelated questions. There are no unrelated questions. They're all related. I'm building a 1950 Buick. I want to make around 500 horsepower with a turbo of an LQ4 that I want to use the stock bottom end. What would you suggest I do the top end? You don't need to do anything to it to make a 500 horsepower 6-liter. You have everything that you need. You don't have to change anything at all. You might want to put ring gap in it if the motor's apart, but it will make 500 horsepower with a turbo, and you're going to have to limit the amount of boost that you run to it because otherwise it's going to make it will make more like 600 with a stock cam and a stock intake manifold and stock heads and all that, because that motor makes about 400 the way that it is stock, the way that we run it on the engine dyno, and even with 7 pounds of boost, it's going to make 600. I have a Cyclone motor. My car was thinking of fabbing up an inner chiller, but I just switched to E85. I think it may not be worth it. That seems like an awful lot of work for the other things that you could do to already make it work. An air to water intercooler, and if you have E85, you're good. Maybe the third coolest there. If you have the SRT4, so even more than mine. One guy's running a Rally Trans sequential. That's got to be a cheap date, right? It's a tall prop. Okay. So you're all about charging hard on the big end, right? Yeah, I'm with you, Burns. I don't think that I would do saltwater. And we even have an endless supply of salt at Bonneville, but we never did that. That's what it came with. It's a used Procharger. So is it? Did I have that right, Dragman? Is it you have a Isn't so it has a does it have a nitrous thing cooling the intercooler, or does it have nitrous going into the supercharger? I think I bought it from Claim to produce 900 horsepower on a 408 340 block Mopar. 408, that's big for a 340, but it depends on if you tell me what supercharger that is, then we could put that into perspective. But certainly Procharger makes superchargers that will easily support that power level. Josh, can what be achieved with stock injectors? If that was your turbo question on the LS6 or on the 6-liter, then no, it can't. You need enough fuel for 600 horsepower, and stock injectors won't get you there. It's going to need to be tuned also because you're making 50% more power going into the front of the inlet of the Procharger. Yeah, I wouldn't do that. Are you drag racing this drag van? Maybe you are. Todd, you have an air to water? Okay. Okay, if you already have an intercooler, you don't need the nitrous in front of the blower. You can if it's a D1SC or a F1A94 or something, F1A, you just need to tell me what blower it is. But most of those will support 900 horsepower. Oh, no intercooler. Okay. I ran my Vortec for a long time with no intercooler on it, but I was only running 7 or 8 pounds. And are you drag van? Are you blowing through a carburetor, or is this an EFI thing? Those are pulled doing 64%. Does it get hot? 64% saying yes, it does. The drag van, the reason I'm saying this on the nitrous is because nitrous is not really going to cool that air very much. If you're making 900 horsepower and you have 800 horsepower worth of supercharged air going in, and you have 100 horsepower worth of nitrous, you're going to see about a 20 or 30 degree change in charge temperature from that. There just isn't enough of the cold nitrous combination to cool the air. There isn't enough of it there. An intercooler is a way better choice. We know because we've run nitrous as the intercooler on a supercharged combination, and run intercoolers on them and compared them directly, and there's no comparison. If you were only running 500 horsepower worth of supercharged air and a 500 shot, you'd have a lot more cooling. You'd also have a lot more power, but that works better. It's just that there's not enough of the cold stuff in there. It's negative 129, but you don't have enough of it to offset the big blast of hot air. 7, 8 pounds, and he gave me the carb, but was thinking about EFI. Okay. Richard, I have to share this funny stuff. My neighbor, 21-year-old with a mullet. Nice. I like this guy already. Thinks his 1999 Chevy truck makes all the power. No mufflers. Come and spy my house, revving it every day. Is 99, but is it at least a 99 like LS, or is it a 99 like Vortec motor? You remember the CO2 sprayers for the air to airs? I have a test up on those. I have a video up on those. We ran one from the guys at what was it called, the Power Ring or something like that, from the guys at Nitrous Express, I think. Yeah. When we get heat soak, you notice it. We have an AFCO HX running 14 pounds of boost, 85. Richard, referencing your email from a little bit of my chasing ghosts with port volume percentages between intake and exhaust questions, you're overthinking it. I mean, you could go down any rabbit hole you want, and I support that, but you're just nitpicking stuff that's not going to make any difference. I've gotten that cold additives and crushed ice. 7-Eleven is the best crushed ice. Yeah, I know. And endless trips when we're on the dyno, and at Bonneville too. And those are drives to town at Bonneville, but endless trips at West Tech going over to the local gas station or whatever, buying 20 bags of ice so that we can run our ice water intercooler stuff. So if nitrous helps 20 to 30 degrees, how much would methanol cool it in degrees? A methanol injection, again, it would depend on how much you're doing it. How much of that are you supplying? Methanol itself is going to be cooling in the combustion chamber, which is going to be a different thing than the air temperature. Richard, we're upgrading to 78, 74 this week on the propane AMC buggy. My question is, would a 50 millimeter wastegate and blow-off valve be too large? There's really no such thing as too big. You'll just have control. Rex, what's going on? Google lightweight internals help that a lot. CO2 didn't work on Engine Masters. Did they test that too? I did. I tried to run CO2, but I didn't have it set up very well. But CO2 works as if you're blowing it through the air-to-air core, just not very much. Maybe if you sat there and laid into the thing and cold soak the like, it might be better to seal the thing off and then just juice it and let it sit there and stew in its own like freezing juices, and then run the test. But blowing it through there, especially with the big fan, because then now we have the fan drawing all that cold away and trying to equalize the temperature of our now cold air-to-air intercooler. So it didn't work that well when I tried it. I think it's a 5.3. He's an okay, but just a bit odd and arrogant. Well, when you're young, that's, we were all that way. We all knew everything when we were young. I have a height problem with the doghouse, but I'll look for an intercooler setup if they make one to fit a 75 Dodge van. I'm trying to think of what year my van was. Problem with methanol is how much fuel system you actually need, and the fuel mileage is bad if you have to drive on that all the time. But a dual fuel thing is really the way to go if you're going to run methanol at the track. Burns, what's the charge temperature on that? Richard, who would you go to try to improve a set of TFS 215 heads? Well, if I had any head work done, I would have Brian Tooley do it, but he's a really good friend. The guys at Total Engine Airflow are really good. They have programs for those. Thanks, sir. I was concerned with the gate relieving exhaust pressure too quick and causing surge. That's probably less of an issue if you have good control over the gate. Engine Masters used a 100-pound bottle and made 5 horsepower. Yeah, but come on. They're a bunch of carbureted big black guys. Throwing shade at my boys. Even dual fuel guys have to pull the meth fuel pump drive. They're running like 100 psi rail pressure. Oh, because they don't, to try to get the fuel flow. You must be talking about guys that are making lots and lots and lots and lots of power. I don't hang around in those circles. I'm not that cool. I'm not methanol cool. I'm just barely E85 cool. Mechanical pump for the meth. Yeah, I get that. I get that. What are we going to need for the nitromethane then? During summer testing, it was 90 to 100 and temps were around 30 to 50 in this altitude. Okay. Guessing you get better at sea level. Are you you're running ice water, right? And what boost? And that boost is 20 pounds or 22 pounds or something. That's good. That's muy bueno. 50 degrees is really good. The motor likes that. And then when you add the cool fuel, you're all set. I remember doing the testing with Mahovitz when he was running one of those supercharged like 5.4 deals. I think it was for a Ford GT or something that he was doing, or maybe the GT 500 drag race guy or something. And they're running methanol, but we had to get that motor at a specific operating temperature, a water temperature. Otherwise, the thing didn't want to work very well. Once we got it to that water temperature, and then we had to make sure that it was at that water temperature every time we ran it. Otherwise, it was not happy with the methanol. Base and Bengal, what's new, man? Thanks for joining us. Welcome. You got to tell us some stories. You got to tell us what cool stuff you have. Or if you don't have cool stuff and you want cool stuff, you got to tell us what kind of cool stuff you want. Or just make something up. Just make it all up because it's all good. One of the things I was looking at, and I almost put that photo up on the BBK intake manifold because it has that plate underneath it. And we had trouble with that plate. And when somebody was asking about the Wyand, I think the Wyand has a plate too. And there are problems with the thickness of that plate and the plate actually moving, especially during decel. Guys are talking about under boost. I'm like, dude, you're not having a problem with that under boost. You're having a problem with that under decel probably. But the thing I was looking at on the BBK intake manifold is that the way that they have their ports, I thought and it already has a plate, a cover plate. So we could make a fuel rail that attaches to that cover plate and have injectors go right into the holes. So we can have inside injectors and be inside injector cool. Low is 17, 27 on high scrap. High scrap is 35. Nice. If only there's a way to use liquid nitrogen. See, for the longest time, I've been wanting to do a liquid nitrogen. I wanted to take and submerge the air-to-air intercooler in a, maybe this deep. I was going to make a trough, like think of a cow's watering trough, but flat and wide, so that I could have the aluminum intercooler, the air-to-air intercooler, submerged in liquid nitrogen. There are some problems associated with that, but that's what I wanted to try because we wanted to see how cold we could get it. I mean, the ideal thing is just run a compressed air supercharger. It's so much better. What do you guys think about water injection? Can you just spray compression in as needed? Do you think that the water is increasing compression because it's displacing air? Or are you asking if you can add compression because you have water methanol? Most metals like aluminum become brittle. That's one of the concerns. And also the outgassing of the liquid nitrogen is also problematic. I'm sure excessive. I'm sure you're trying to be clever, but You need to do better than that. You need to tell me why you think that will add power. Aluminum will become brittle at negative 300. Well, we're not going to be there. Oh, what is liquid? I'm thinking of nitrous. What is liquid nitrogen? What temperature is that? I mean, it's going to be warmer, but negative 320. So yeah, that'd be a problem. Negative 195 C. Who knows what a Celsius number is? (300 Kelvin). No, it's not 300 Kelvin. It's minus 320 degrees Fahrenheit. Negative 195.79 degrees Celsius. Liquid is a very cold liquid that boils into nitrogen gas at room temperature and pressure. The temperature of liquid nitrogen is negative 320 degrees Fahrenheit. Liquid nitrogen can freeze or explode if mishandled and can cause suffocation by displacing oxygen. Liquid nitrogen can also solidify into solid nitrogen below 63 degrees Kelvin. So if you could get it to negative 346, dude, we wouldn't have liquid nitrogen. We'd have solid nitrogen. That's awesome. Yeah, Burns negative 2000 that's pretty cold. Nitrogen is way cooler than water. It is. No, excessive. I understand what you're saying, but every time I've tried any form of water methanol injection, and we've tried water methanol or water injection back in the day too, and we didn't see any power. But I would want there to be power. I would want it to make the motor 12-1 instead of 10-1 and, do that. I don't know how effective the water is at making itself so that it's conducive to flame travel and all that. But that would be cool if it cooperated and made the ideal either piston dome design or the ideal combustion chamber design. That would be kind of awesome. It would be like the liquid metal Terminator, except combustion chamber or piston. B&R wants to make $100,000 intercooler. That'd be a lot. Once you see a windshield washer fluid. But the thing is, the windshield washer fluid that I used was mostly water. At least one of them was. But the good one had more alcohol in it. Yeah, liquid nitrogen would be cool. Because then I was trying to figure out, okay, well, if we can't submerge the air-to-air intercooler in it, then I just need to pump it through an air-to-water, right? What are you going to get to pump liquid nitrogen? Can titanium take liquid nitrogen temps? I know it can take. Oh, that's right, they do use it in space. I was thinking that I know that they use it for heat, like SR-71 stuff and MiG stuff, but they use it in space too. That's got to be cold out there, right? That's like sweater weather cold. Air to dry ice. Dry ice is not very good. You need to do some 5-cylinder V10 dyno runs. I agree. V10 needs to happen. I thought water injection was to help reduce detonation so you could keep your timing up on a motor with some compression. It is. It's so that you can stave off harmful detonation. And it does work to do that. There's no doubt about that. So if you can put together a motor and you constantly rely on water injection, you could make that motor with more static or dynamic compression and or more timing with the use of water methanol or water injection, even by itself, than you could without it. Because they don't B&R, you seem to be a metallurgist. They use a bunch of different alloys of titanium though, right? In the space program and in the aerospace. If a head flows 280 CFM at 550 lift, should the cam lift exceed 550 lift? If yes, the answer is how much more? Well, what does it flow at 600 lift? And honestly, this matching the camshaft to the head like that, I don't ever do that. A lot of LS heads will, especially particularly cathedral port heads, will stall at 550 or 600 lift. We run more than 600 lift cams in all of them, and it still makes more power because you're not looking at it. Doesn't go up to that number and then just flow there and have a problem. It goes up there and comes back, and it's spending all of its time below that peak number, going up to it and accelerating away from it. So that's not an actual thing. Chevy Colorado inline 5-cylinder. That's a good motor. It's just if it's anything like the 6-cylinder version, it's fairly tall. It has a really deep pan, and Roger, you're gonna on a small block Chevy with AFR 195s, you're gonna do just fine. And we would run more than 600 lift cams on those if you want to make lots of power. If that's the kind of camshaft you want to run, then you would do it to make lots of power. YouTube doesn't like when content creators make more than one live or post per day. Really? Gal's got to eat, right? Not cost effective, but it would be cool to see difference between aluminum intercooler and copper of the same dimension. I agree. Dry ice and methanol. I don't know that I would go that route. $4,000 intercooler core in titanium. Yeah, but Burns, that's Burns. He's got that kind of money. That much change probably just dropped out of his pocket when he just sits down in his car. So that's how he rolls. That's how he rolls. We're going to close out our poll because it's time to go, yo. 68% saying, yes, Richard, you don't know what you're talking about. Heat soak's a real thing, so why don't you go do more studying? Oh, I love the internet. I wanted to read you guys a comment that I got today that I just absolutely loved. And I so want to talk to the guy and buy him a beer and just have him yell at me. I would love that. Do I get a hex impact driver, a 3/8 impact, or a neck light? I would use the 3/8 impact more. Dry ice and methanol sounds like a bomb. Yeah, that's not a good thing. Duration to optimize flow time at peak CFM. Titanium rods are $800 to $1,400 each. I've had 2 cars with titanium rods. That's right. That's how I roll. Admiral, the one that I want is the angled 3/8. Troy has one that I use all the time because it gets into the tight spots. And I'd like to have one like that. Scat rotating assembly, flat top pistons, ISKI, 246 at 50, 550 lift on 108. Is what, Roger, what motor is that? And is it a single pattern cam? Oh, you said it was a small block Chevy, right? I think. Did you say that? Or did I imagine that? Did I just want you to say that? I want a titanium rod for my Predator. My buddy Jimmy has some titanium rods from the NSX. You need to put one of those in there. I remember thinking that was the coolest thing in the world, was the titanium connecting rods. I'm not saying it'll be smart. That should be on a shirt, right? 385 small Chevy, single pattern, Hurricane intake manifold. Okay. I think somebody should talk you out of the single plane, or not out of the single plane. You're with a 246 cam. You're obviously wanting to rev this thing and make power. It seems like, although 108, it's a hydraulic roller. 246. I'd say 248, 254. Did somebody talk you into the single pattern cam because of the intake to exhaust flow relationship on the airflow research head? Because it's so good. Aluminum is actually a poor conductor. I thought it was a good heat conductor. I mean, it's not the number one choice, but okay, 930 over 799 heads of truck Norris cam. I don't know. I think somebody asked me about this before. Dyno results. I can only get you close. 6.2. 6 liter. Yeah, it's not there though. I'm still looking. Hang with me. Stay with me. Stay with me. Stay with me. Here we go. You know, 480, 490, something like that. 495. Oh no, you're not going to make that much because this is with a rec port head. This is an LY6, so less than that. 460 or something like that, probably. Roger. Okay, so David told you to run that camshaft. He's a pretty sharp guy. So 11.11 and a quarter to 1 static. And it's a 246 on a 106 or 108. Okay. You're going to run good gas in this then? Copper's superior conductor of heat. Yeah. Check out Rodder's garage. He did a twin M90 build on a small block Chevy. Yeah, a couple of guys have done that, but I'll check it out. What boost level do you recommend going to? Hoop rings? I don't know. I'd never been at that level. The ones that I put together, the stock bottom end stuff, we were not near where that would be needed. And that sort of thing, I think, would only be needed on something that's not a stock block. I think that's going to be an aftermarket block deal. Jeff, I think you'd be better off picking a different head. Look at Pro Max or uh, Skip White. Look at one of those, or an Airflow Research Enforcer head or something, rather than that head. I think you'll be ultimately happier. Bracken G8. The rule for compression is for every 1 full point of compression in that range that you're talking about, it's 3 to 4% increase in NA power. So if you know what you were making beforehand and you went up 1 point in compression, you would multiply that by 1.03 or 1.04 and give you an idea where you are power wise. Richard, he fabricated the blowers. He made his own blowers. Why would he do that? Fabricated the twin blower manifold. Okay, you definitely have to make that or an adapter to something else. And the intake side, he ran a single carb. Did he ran a single carb feeding both of them, or a single? I'll have to take a look and see. Yeah, Jeff, they are cheap. There's no doubt about that. But you won't be happy putting something together and then having to take it back apart. No, BNR, you're right, but we don't need to use NASA tech for doing what we're doing. We don't want to overly complicate it, and most people don't want to overly expense it. And on that note, it is time to go. I'm finishing up I'm on the last clip of editing the video on the 5.7 LS1 modifications to that will go up, and then I'll be back tomorrow. Thank you guys all for showing up.